Guy, where are you?
I'm in Cape Town and I've got to the end of my little odyssey, much to my surprise. And it's a very strange feeling.
Well, congratulations. Uh, I love it that you say it's a little odyssey. It's been a huge, tiring, challenging, brave odyssey.
I have to say, I occasionally I've found myself thinking that it was significantly more difficult than I was expecting. I've gone back over some of the film I've taken, and I've heard myself saying I wouldn't recommend it to anybody because it's just too difficult. And and parts of it have been a real challenge.
So tell us about the last leg. We left you, I think you were heading in across Namibia and then down through South Africa.
It all happened quite quickly, to be honest. The southern Namibia is fantastic, but there's a lot of nothingness, a lot of gravel roads, spectacular scenery, enormous vistas and views everywhere, and nobody there. But there's not a lot of point in stopping there, if you know what I mean. And so I sort of found myself saying, well, what am I trying to do? And the answer is I was trying to get to Cape Town for all the reasons that we know. So there was no point hanging around and just going to see things for the sake of seeing things when they weren't that special, having seen so much sort of open countryside and the rest of it. So we kind of galloped on and found ourselves crossing in South Africa slightly ahead of where we were planning to do so. And then when we got to South Africa, again, the road down the Eastern Cape, I think it's called, towards Cape Town is very straightforward, very straight, very good. And there's nothing to stop and see. So we stopped one night because it's a 2-day journey and a chap's farm, a vineyard. And then we suddenly said, well, Cape Town just around the corner. Let's get on with it.
Was there any kind of ceremony at the end? Was there a finishing line?
No. And I thought about it, and it would have been the problem. The problem is organizing things on the move is really tricky, and I didn't have the right contacts in place to set everything up, and it's not quite my style. I just was quite happy just to get there, and when I did get there, I was so deflated and so literally as I turned the engine off, I collapsed in a heap like a snowman melting in the sun. I just felt sort of completely exhausted, and I would have been no good at some ceremony. So I was just glad to turn the engine off and be in the centre of town. And it was a very odd feeling. I was completely I was spent like a mayfly, exhausted.
How are you feeling about it now? Now it's had time to sink in.
Unusually, I recognise what people are saying and saying that it's quite an epic trip. But up until recently, I just thought it was why is it being so difficult? And I kind of assumed that the challenges I was facing along the way were just part of the deal, and I would overcome them all, which I of course eventually did. But in retrospect, it's been quite a journey, and I haven't met anybody whose eyes haven't rolled when they've seen the flags on the side of the door, the number of countries I've been through, the number of borders I've been through, and the countries that have tested me and all the rest of it. And everybody's been remarkably impressed. So I'm quite pleased with myself, quite proud of myself in a funny way for doing it, and very pleased the wagon has made it in one piece.
It didn't look like it at one stage, did it? That wagon, if a wagon can be an albatross, it didn't look like
Yeah.
the right thing to be in.
To be completely fair, the clutches were human error. Not they were probably the clutch is probably a bit weak for the weight of the vehicle. The suspension problems were definitely human error by hitting potholes and just having a bit of a drama of a drive. The clutch was probably a bit of a problem because I probably wasn't driving it very well. So I can't blame the car for having problems. And spare parts were the issue. Getting spare parts anywhere north of Namibia is almost impossible. Once you get to Namibia, they understand about Volkswagens, and the parts are quite readily available. You might have to wait a couple of days, but you can get them from South Africa. Given that most people, and me most of the time, were on ordinary-ish roads and ordinary tracks, it's so convenient being able to just pop the roof up and go to bed, or being able to lift the side up and make a cup of tea or whatever you want to do. It's a perfect vehicle for it. And when I saw lots of these South African and European and German tourists with their pickups and their 4x4s having to live outside their vehicle, it is actually the perfect vehicle for this sort of journey if the parts are more available.
Now, we all know what the main point of this journey was, which was to raise awareness of Parkinson's across Africa. So how's that gone, do you think?
I have yet to complete that. I've got a couple of jobs in South Africa to do it, but I reckon I have barged my way into over 300 million houses and appeared on national television in every country apart from the two Congos as I've driven through them from Sierra Leone. Whether or not people have actually listened to what I've said, they've had the opportunity to hear me, and they've had the opportunity to turn the televisions off. So in a number of cases, if one or two families alone in each country have just started talking about it a bit more, then I've done a good thing. And I've met some staggering people who put me to shame, to be honest, the amount of work they do on behalf of Parkinson's along the way through. And they've been utterly brilliant. And they're really doing an amazing job with very few resources. And it's been a real sort of eye-opener to see how much good news there is in trying to take this problem on.
And I know your own condition along the way has presented huge challenges. How are you feeling now?
Well, I thought it took me 4 days to recover from the journey, to be honest, and I was completely worthless for a long time. I couldn't do a thing for 4 days on arrival. So the first part of this week, I just lay on the ground most of the time doing nothing. But now I'm returning to normal. But my new normal is not the same as my old normal. And I have to be much more careful. I don't trip over things, much more careful I can walk in a straight line, much more conscious of where bits and pieces are so I don't crash into them when I'm moving, all that sort of stuff. And when I've eaten enough food and got properly rested, I'll probably be better. But I have deteriorated over the time. There's no doubt about it.
Well, huge admiration for what you've done. I've had so many messages saying how inspiring your trip's been, and I'm sure everyone will applaud you and be very relieved that you made it, because at one stage it looked as if you might not.
And that was genuine as well. I really thought to myself in Gabon, I thought, how can I? It wasn't so much how can I continue. It was more a question of how can I explain the fact that I couldn't continue. How can I face the reality of all those people who've invested time and effort and support in me to have let them down by not achieving it was something I was considering and worrying about, because I didn't think I'd be able to carry on. And that was the point when Congo was yet to come, Angola was yet to come, and all that sort of stuff, which was very sort of, it was very unpromising. But in fact, the Congos were not just fine. They were terribly accommodating, very easy, very helpful people. The border crossings were significantly easier than I thought, and relatively drama-free. So once I got out of Gabon, the journey became easier all the time, and that low point was the further behind me, the better, to be honest.
Anyway, Guy, thank you very much, and have a good rest.